I've got this. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Okay. I was with the CFO guys earlier on this morning, and I had much more enthusiasm. So it's kind of like a comparison game. So how's everyone doing? Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity for having me to speak to you today. I've been invited to come and share some of my experiences with regards to the work that I've done with millennials and share some facts around millennials and also possibly share some opinion about why they actually matter. Normally, when I get to speak about these young people, these millennials, I get one of two responses. So the first response, people roll their eyes and they're like, what's the big deal? We were young before. Why are we making these guys the biggest thing in the world? And the second reaction is some people are really excited about these guys and like, millennials, yes, everything should be about them. So I'm trying to figure out who is in the room and what kind of crowd we have here. I think by the sound of the room, I think I know my crowd, okay? So thank you for enjoying that. And I think this is off. If they can help me switch it on back. Oh, it's me, actually. So we've heard this today, right? Everywhere we've been listening to conversations about how the world is changing and how the world is changing rapidly, right? There's a lot happening, you know. The way in which people are dating is different. So people get ghosted, you know, and people have to swipe left and right in a way to date. The way in which we have conversations is different. I know with me and a lot of my friends, we hate answering the phone. So any millennials in the house? Yeah, so we'd rather text. The world is changing in the way in which we want to engage with each other. There's climate change. The way in which we are purchasing, the way in which we are deciding what to do with our lives is changing. So there's a lot happening. And for people that are in corporate, that's a lot to deal with, right? That's a lot to deal with, and you are being told that you need to innovate, right? You are being told that your businesses or your business units have to evolve. You are being told that you need to be agile, you have to be disruptive, and maintain profit. That's a lot to juggle all at once, right? And then, just in case we forgot, there's one more thing. The millennials. These damn millennials that everybody is trying to understand. The cringe word of all cringe words, right? It's had such a connotation, and there's so much that we hear about these guys and so much that we don't hear about these guys. So when I speak about millennials today, I'm speaking about people born from 1980 to the early 2000s. So when I was speaking to the other group, people were like, 1980? I'm a millennial? So people got really excited. So that's the group I'm speaking about. I also understand that we are in South Africa and it's a different context. So you can be a millennial, but if you're coming from a different context, your worldview can be different from a millennial that's living in Sandton versus a millennial that's growing up in rural South Africa. So I am aware of those differences as well. And I am aware of Afro-millennials, Afro-millennials that people call them. But basically, this will be all based on people that I've gotten to engage with and the business that I run. So we've all heard the stereotypes of these young people. What have you heard about them? Instant gratification, right? All they want is that they can order their food now and get it now. They can order the Uber now and get it now. They get things instantly. If they want information, they can go on Google, they can get the information. So people say these guys are impatient. People say, a lot of organizations say, oh, these young people, they are not loyal. They're very risky. You know, they'll come in and they'll leave you. But I think that there's also some good things to be said about millennials. So these young people are tech savvy. We understand that. And then people who have small kids will see it quite immediately, how technology is so easy for them to be able to access. These millennials are global in the way in which they think, right? But also very locally invested, right? If we think about how young people are today, they're very, very socially conscious. So you're quite mindful about what you say to them. You actually don't know what to say to millennials right now because it could be offensive or very problematic, as they would say. So I think it's very important for us to try and understand these guys quite holistically because there's pros and cons that go with this age group of young people. These young people are not just, so usually when people think millennials, they're thinking, oh, all these graduates, all these young people that just come out of university and have just come in. We've spoken about the range of who these millennials are. So what does that mean? It means that people who are running businesses are these millennials. People who are our leaders are these millennials. These millennials are also future and current customers. So when we're thinking about our products or how we are marketing our products, it's very important to think about the group of people that we are marketing these products to. They also are employees and our future employees. And the stats are telling us that these young people by next year, a couple of months, and some organizations it's surpassed it, but you will have more than 50% of the workforce made out of these millennials. In fact, by 2025, it will be 75%. They are the largest generation at the moment. So it's quite important to try and understand them. And I don't want to by any chance trying to exclude anyone, because usually when you talk about this, people are like, what? So what happens to everybody else? You know, are you just saying we focus on these guys? It's just about including and trying to understand, rather than saying we don't know these people and, oh, we can't deal with them. We need to shift our perspective. We need to shift our perspective about how we see them and not just focus on the stereotypes that I've just spoken about, right? Are there other ways that we can try and understand these young people who are coming into these organizations so that we can be able to utilize them effectively in the workspaces that we are in? So Deloitte does a millennial survey, and they've been doing it for the last 8 years. This millennial survey, you can find it online, all the years if you like. This one specifically was, I think, the 2018 one where I got the stat from, but it talks about 56% of millennials reject working for companies. And there's a couple of reasons why these young people are rejecting working for companies. One is that they feel that their values are not aligned with the values of the organization. These young people say, companies put up these values, but when you're actually in there, you don't feel that these values are aligning. And I think in the past, people would just be okay with it. They'd be like, oh, well, this doesn't happen. But these young people are not okay with it, and they voice out that they're not okay with the fact that their values don't align. These young people are leaving these workplaces because they feel that companies talk about purpose and impact, and then they question, where is the purpose? Where is the impact? What are we actually talking about here? So they don't like working for these organizations. They also say that they feel that they're being overlooked for leadership positions. And, you know, millennials are not necessarily saying that they all want to be CEOs. I don't think that's based on the ones I've worked with anyways. They're not trying to be the next CEO. All they're trying to do is be a leader in their space. So if it's a young person who's a photographer during the day, in the evening, and they happen to be an accountant during the day, they want to be able to showcase that somehow in their workplace. So be able to arrive and be there holistically. And I'm pretty sure most people want to do that. But millennials just speak about it, and they're not scared to speak about it because that's the world in which they exist in. The millennial survey also looked at stability and loyalty of these young people, and it was interesting to see that the question that was asked to these young people is, if you had a choice, how long would you leave the existing organization that you're in? And in South Africa, a percentage of young people who said they would stay with their current employer was 43% of young people say up to 2 years. In 2 years, up to 2 years, I'll stay with them up to 2 years. Okay? So this is interesting because you spend so much money trying to find these young people, training them, and they're saying, yeah, I'll stay for 2 years, right? And what was interesting as well with that stat was that these young people go into the workplace, but they've got one foot out the door. So they'll get their job, but they're thinking about, oh, what's next? What is the next thing I can do? And I think that freaks out a lot of organizations to say, how do we keep these people? Why are they trying to leave, or whatever the case is? And I think we need to change our mindset in terms of how we look at this, because maybe it's like a boomerang. You let it go, maybe it comes back, you know? And but organizations need to think quite differently about how we do all of this recruitment and retaining these young people. it was also asked the percentage that prefer full-time versus freelance work. We had 56% in South Africa who prefer full-time permanent employment. That's a large number. But you can imagine that there was a big number of young people who said, I prefer freelance. A percentage of millennials who preferred the freelance was around 43, or consultative work. And I guess these are things that you've heard of in terms of the gig economy, that people are rather doing gigs. You know, these young people have their gigs. Some of them are influencers on Facebook, right? On Instagram. They influencers on Instagram, they're getting paid lots of money, and then they come and do their job. They're doing their things on YouTube, teaching people how to do makeup, and then they've got their 9 to 5. You know, so they're starting to understand the world a little bit differently in terms of how they should be spending their time. So I guess it's also about kind of trying to think differently about how we are creating the work environment for these young people so that they can be autonomous as well. You can, as I said, you can go into Google and just look up the latest stats for this year. And this survey was done with young professionals across globally and in South Africa and the rest of Africa as well. The biggest thing about this is about understanding the disconnect. I think there's a misunderstanding of the different generations. So a lot of times, in my experience, when I've spoken to people, they're like, well, Nelly, I was young before as well. I was enthusiastic as well. What makes these guys different? It is different because they are growing in a different time. It is a different time. When somebody was a young person in 1950, it's really different in 2019. The world, the pace, everything that we were nodding at the beginning of how the world is changing so rapidly, that has a big influence in the way in which they make decisions, in the way in which they see the world. So it's really about trying to find a way to understand this disconnect that happens between the young people as well as the older generation. I guess businesses have worked in the past, and they still do. But how young people see these is it's outdated business hierarchy structures that just don't work, that don't create a seat at the table for young people to be able to input, right? You have to wait 10 years, or you have to wait until you are senior to be able to say something. And they are used to saying whatever they want in 140 characters, whenever they want. They are used to saying what they want by posting a photo of whatever they want. So why does the world has to be different in the workplace? Is what they're not understanding is that this is how the world is working, and then I come to work, and then I have to wait my turn, right? And waiting their turn is something that a lot of organizations do without saying. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not deliberate, it's unintended consequences, where the organizations will create a future leaders forum or tomorrow's leaders forum, but what they've said to us and what we've learned is that the tomorrow's leaders means wait your turn. You'll only be a leader tomorrow. We'll hear you, but tomorrow. Wait tomorrow. So they create these platforms where it's not authentic, where these young people are not really being part of a real conversation, but it's kind of like created as if it's something. So we need to be really careful about these platforms that we create for these young people and not telling them to wait their turn and finding ways to interact with them. And it's not by any chance saying you're excluding, you're just choosing to include these young people in the conversations as well. They feel that these organizations have slower growth opportunities. As I've said just previously, is that it's not really about everybody wanting to be a CEO, but it's about creating opportunities for people to lead their own lives, because that's what they do. They show their profiles on their social media. They are leading their lives. They are leading their lives. They are showcasing. They love talking about themselves. You know, so they are already doing that in their everyday life. But when they get to work, it's like, wait a minute, you'll have to wait, you know. So we need to just try and figure out how do we work with that. And I guess if you're telling these people to wait and they're becoming a majority in your organization, are your objectives going to wait so long? Can they wait, you know, or do you rely on a certain number of people to be able to make a difference in your organizations? And I guess sometimes when we think about innovation, we're thinking about doing something new, and it's not always about doing something new. It's about stop doing the old, right? Sometimes we're saying we've been doing this for too long. Let's just stop that and see what happens if we stop doing that. So what is very, very important is to be able to hear diverse perspectives, right? Is to be able to hear or to create a space where you can hear what the young people have to say, where you can actually engage with them and create a space where different perspectives are being heard. And because these young people are choosing who they want to work with, right? And this is based on their values. And if the values are mismatched, then they don't work for the organizations. So I'm now in a consulting firm, and what's interesting is that sometimes you will get young people who don't want to work for a certain project because they just don't believe in it, you know? Like back in the day, you'd get young people who didn't want to work for a tobacco company or a diesel company. Now they're thinking about food. They're thinking about, oh, I don't want to work for sugar. I don't want to do this, because it's misaligned with what they really believe. So it's important to really understand your organization and how you can attract these people to work for us. So, but all is not lost. You know, it's not all a gloomy picture. I'll tell you a little story. So I co-founded an organization called Spring Age. And I co-founded this organization about 7 years ago with a very good girlfriend of mine. And when I started the company, my parents were just like, you need to go find a real job. What are you doing, you know? And then 2 years ago, our company was bought by Deloitte. And I guess that's when our parents thought that was actually, we were doing something about it, and they thought we were doing a good job. But we started the business because we knew we live in a very young continent. Africa is very young, right? The population of young people, we've got so many young people. And when we have to think about the future of our continent, of our country, it is imperative that we are discussing the future with the people that are going to be in that future, right? So we basically started off by saying, how can we bring together bright young minds in our country to collaborate and come up with ideas that will move our country forward. The business evolved and became a platform where young people could give insights and new ideas on big challenges on our country, big challenges that big organizations were also having. So that's how we started the business, and the premise was on bringing young people in the forefront of coming up with ideas and insights. So I think what we do is something that I will share with everyone here, and perhaps that is something that you can try and do within your own organizations. This is something that has worked for us, and perhaps this is something that could help you in trying to future-proof your organizations working with these young people. So it's a three-pronged methodology that we use, and the first bit is about understanding the young people, right? We have a way in which we understand, and I'll share a little bit about that. We have the engaging with young people, and we have the innovating with young people, which we call youth-led innovation. So the first about understanding young people is we understand that these young people don't exist in organizations on their own. They're in organizations where there are people who are brilliant, who've been in those organizations, who understand stuff. So we have this intergenerational engagement where we bring together these young people and different other generations from the workplace and have an intergenerational conversation. And in that conversation, it's about understanding what are the pros, what are the cons in every single generation. And what's been interesting is that we worked in an organization where we set the people down, and we had millennials, baby boomers, and Gen X. And the millennials started talking about, okay, guys, what do you think the pros about you? What's good about being a millennial? They're like, oh, we tech savvy, we're this, we're awesome, we're great. They didn't have much to say about what they didn't like about themselves. And then we asked them about what they thought about the baby boomers. And they're like, baby boomers, CIA. You can't get any information from those guys. They keep everything to themselves. And then both baby boomers and millennials were all like, yeah, we don't understand the Gen Xers. All they want to do is tell us about their MBAs and how they went to Harvard and all of that stuff. So it was a really rich conversation to have, to be able to, for people to be able to understand where they're all coming from. And I remember in one instance, there was an older gentleman who was like, you guys are calling us CIA, but let me explain why. In my time, I had to really spend time to learn everything. You know, it wasn't easy. I couldn't just get it the way that I wanted. So I've grown up with that mentality of saying, you have to earn. You have to earn information, you have to earn stuff, and actually that's the basis that I'm coming from. And all of a sudden, the millennial guy's like, oh, okay, well, I get that. So at least I'm understanding where you are coming from. And I think that was a rich way to start engaging people and getting them to engage with each other, because it's not just about the millennials, but it's also about the other generations as well. And we could also, and I know a lot of companies do this as well, but the reverse mentoring is such a great idea that people do. But when done properly, you know, sometimes it's not about saying, okay, we're doing reverse mentoring, you and that guy, you go together, that's great. You know, we really need to understand people holistically, who they are, what they do, and that kind of thing, for these kind of programs to be able to work in an organization. So that's the understand piece, and we found that it works, and it's a way in which you can get people to kind of get the conversation going. So the second one is about engaging, and the engaging one is the concept of the Millennial Board. Actually, the Millennial Advisory Board that we have come up with, which has been lots of fun, and lots of organizations actually love this. And this really is about getting a group of young people from across your own organization to be able to advise a CEO on a critical challenge that they may have. So what's really worked well about the Millennial Board is that you get a group of young people from across different business units of your organization. What's great is that you are teaching them already at a very young age to be able to work across the business, because that doesn't happen in a lot of corporate spaces. Then once that is done, you're getting them together to come up with ideas on a challenge that the CEO has. So first of all, you're not saying we're here to teach you, because that's usually the thing, right? You're teaching young people. You're saying you've got something to offer and we want to learn from it. So you're getting them to give you ideas, to tell you what you should be doing differently, which really works well. The third thing that works well with the Millennial Board as well is that these young people get to understand how hard it is to be an executive in an organization. Because all of a sudden, they understand the strategy, the CEO is telling them, I want to do this, but these are the barriers. And they're understanding that, it's actually not as easy as we thought it was. And it gives them perspective. They become the champions. They tell the other young people about how it's done in the organization. They become a group that you can always go into, tap into, and it filters through the organization. But it's a really good way to engage young people in the organization. And plus, you know, when we recruit these young people, when they recruit it, it's really awesome because they self-select themselves. So you put out the challenge, we do all these funky stuff, and then they say, me, this is why I should be part of it. And it's not just based on the fact that they're a CA, but they'll say, you know, I want to be part of an innovation program because actually I'm a community leader in my small community in Qunu, and this is what I do as well. And so you get to understand these young people holistically about everything else that they are doing outside of their normal 9 to 5, and they love that. So this has been a way to engage with young people, and I think this is something that organizations can do or are doing, which is great. And the last one is the innovation part, and I spoke about the youth-led innovation. So statistically speaking, there are smarter people out there in the world than they can be in any organization at a given time. So the spring break process is about saying that we choosing for young people to be the ones that are coming up with ideas for us because they don't know what they don't know. okay? Young people won't tell you how something was tried 10 years ago and how it failed, and so they will just try something new. They will try and just come up with bold ideas because they don't have a lot to think about in their brains in terms of experience. And the youth-led innovation is about choosing young people who are external to your organization, okay? So we would choose young people who, let's say a company has a challenge, we get young people who are professionals, we get young people who are artists, who are students, a really diverse group of people who will then come and give insights on a specific challenge that the organization has. And this works really well because you're getting perspective from different people. And as you may have heard of the gig economy and how it's important to collaborate, this is a good example of collaborating with people that you would have normally not been able to collaborate with within your organization. So those are the 3 ways in which we've learned how to engage young people, how to collaborate with them, and how to innovate with them. So I think for now, I will leave it there, and I will open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Neliswa. Thank you very much. So I just fall out the millennium window, like just. So here's my situation. Like, what are some of the things that I have to do to kind of, be more accepting and co-create with these millennials? Give me some pointers.
Oh, God. So I think, okay, another thing that I probably want to say is that it's not always... So we say these generic things about age and generations and that kind of thing, right? But it's also a mindset thing, right? So it's about a mindset. So some people have I work with like a 65-year-old man who is the most millennial in his thinking than any other young person that I've met. Seriously, and it happens, right? So what could you do? I think the answer is about trying to understand, as you would do with any relationship that you have, right? And not, because the stereotypes put a barrier to be like, oh, fast, instant gratification, this is who they are. We know that when we're working with diversity, in any form anyways, the stereotypes are a barrier. But how we go through that barrier is about trying to understand the next person, trying to see how we can find similarities maybe, and figure out a way to work together.
Okay, awesome. I mean, I have a lot of energy sometimes, so I think I've got that millennium in me. And I'd love to meet that 65-year-old. Anyone else with a question, please? Okay, right in front.
Hello?
It's not on.
Hello?
Should be on. It's on.
Hello? Yeah. So you mentioned all the stereotypes that we all basically have, and especially the older generations or the people that were born before 1980. Now, how do you integrate, for example, emotional intelligence development in a company in order to break those barriers, break those limiting beliefs? Because at the end of the day, the younger generation, so let's say millennials, generation X, Z, and everybody else, they all have their own beliefs about the other generation. Yeah. If they are older, then I can't approach them, I can't come to them. And when they are that older generation, they will think, like you mentioned, that instant gratification, they are very emotional nonsense, but that's a different discussion. How do you see emotional development in a business? As I wouldn't say a problem solving, because it's a process. It doesn't happen like this overnight. But how would you see EQ development in a company in order to tackle those beliefs, barriers?
Sure. Okay, I'll give it a try. I think it is about that kind of what I spoke about, that intergenerational understanding piece that you try and do. For people to get to know each other. So how do you get people to try to get to know each other on a human level, right? How do you make them get to know each other? Oh, okay, well, it's like dating, right? You go on Tinder. So it's, I think it's like trying to create moments where people can connect, creating moments where people can connect with each other, creating moments where people can see what each other likes or each other doesn't like. One of the things that they do at Deloitte is this thing where they get like a director to share about his life, and then people to kind of interact, but it's not about like accolades, but it's about how they grew up and this kind of thing. And doing that helps people be able to be much more connected and be able to connect with each other when you don't put the barriers of levels of education and that kind of thing. So find ways for people to connect on a human level without the labels that we have with each other. Maybe?
Oh, you got some more? Okay,
Sorry.
sure.
How then in your space you will, like I mentioned, how do you make people? Because when we sit in our mindset comfort zone type of a thing, how do you, let's say in your business space, in your work, in your office, how do you make people to change that perspective or even want to change that perspective? Because it's a change. People are not very open to change.
You don't make them, right? You present opportunities for people to connect, and those opportunities start evolving, and you try creating more of those opportunities for people to connect, because you can't push people to something, but you can show them a different perspective of someone. And hence I'm saying, like, if people just look at a CEO as, oh, he's this, Mr. Director and this, if he just talks about the fact that he grew up in, I don't know, somewhere remote where another person can connect with, that's how people make connections.
So I actually just want to add on that. And one of the important things that I've seen in organizations is, and you mentioned the mindset, right? And it's important for organizations to kind of embrace a growth mindset, an owner's mindset, and a beginner's mindset in everything that we do, right? So if I'm going into a place and I'm meeting somebody new, I have to decide what mindset do I want to embrace at this specific time, right? Based on where they are. If it's a millennial, I'll probably want to go with the beginner's mindset because perhaps they're coming with something new that I'm not aware of. And if somebody who's more experienced than me, perhaps I want to embrace a growth mindset. Perhaps I could learn from them, right?
Exactly.
So here's another question here.
Hi.
My name is Ntabise Mposhoko. I am from LFP. I just want to say I agree with what you're saying. I'm a millennial myself, and I'm a director of an LFP training consultant. The challenges, there's going to be a question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
The challenges that are posed to young millennials who happens to be directors in big companies is, one, you are being seen as an arrogant person, okay? Simply because of you young, you think fast, you think on your feet, okay? You walk into an organization that has got a number of board of directors who are probably in there, and with all due respect, sitting in their 55 years of age, and thinking like I do is different. So what I want to ask you is, how do you move from a point where gender, age, and race probably should not be even be accounted into a millennium prospect, but going over and above, getting them to be a position where they understand that when they step into a company, they shouldn't take over. They should be led for them to lead in the future. The reason I'm saying this is because we have got them young as they are with their bright ideas and bright mind. Nobody wants to give them an opportunity because once they've been given opportunity, they take over. That's how we are. But how do you go to a point where you say, don't take over? Still, you need to be led because there's a point where you need to get to where you have to go through the ranks for you to be at a certain point. But the main question is, how do you navigate your way into their mind and say, don't take over, you still need to learn. But at the same time, not disregarding them, taking them in consideration and leading them into becoming the future.
Thank you. It's a good question. I think one of the ways that we've tried doing that is, the Millennial Board that I've spoken about. It sounds like a program that you can just do, but it's actually those little nuances within the program. Is that, okay, you're creating a space where you can be awesome because you're a millennial, but you're also creating a space where you can really understand what it takes. And I think when people can experience something, then they start understanding it a little bit more. Because all of a sudden, I've been given this big task. All of a sudden, I'm being trusted, okay? I'm being trusted to think about a specific thing about my own, and really trusted. Because sometimes it doesn't work when you are pretending to trust someone or you're pretending to do something for someone, right? People can feel it. So all of a sudden they're being trusted with something, and then they start realizing that, geez, it takes a lot. Actually, I don't feel like being that guy. He has to think about people's salaries. So it's almost like an immersion of some sort where you are giving people the experience of a day in the life of somebody else, and but also giving them that glory because you understand what it is that they care about. So I think that helps when you are creating such programs to really think deeper about why you are doing these programs. And as a young person, you know, people think you're arrogant or whatever the case is. I think it's about knowing the differences do exist. So I can't just come into a room and think, oh, people can't see that I'm a woman, I'm black, and it's obvious. You know, people do see that. But it's about saying, okay, then how do you find a way to connect with people? And sometimes you have to do the work first. You know, you can't always expect other people to do something. So you have to be the one that goes first. Understand that 55-year-old guy, what's he about? What is he like? You play that game, and then you'll find a way to connect.
So basically what you're saying is there's no better time to kind of self-reflect in a lot of things that we do.
Yeah.
We stop and ask ourselves the question, you know, what is making me have this perception of this person before I start to engage, right?
Exactly.
So we always gotta constantly go into be in reflective mode.
Yeah.
There's another question over here, I think.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Well, why don't you go while they sort out the mic?
Okay, that mic is...
Hi, Neliswa.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your passion in helping to shift perspectives around millennials.
Thank you.
I'm Cheryl from Whole Person Academy. You mentioned about the different subcategories of millennials, and I want to ask you about first-generation professionals. So these are the students that are, the first in their families to get a university degree. Then they go from blue-collar work to white-collar work. And what I found is that they really struggle still to adapt because they haven't had that perspective around how to speak up in the workplace, how to manage your money. So is some of the work that you do also to help companies to understand some of the specific challenges that first-generation professionals in the millennial group also have as well?
Okay, thank you. So not specifically. We haven't done work specifically to say this is how you understand these guys that have been different. But for clients, what we've helped clients understand about millennial customers is that they are progressive, they are diverse. So for example, if you're a retailer and you're looking at black middle class client, it's important to understand that, okay, yes, they earn this much money, but on weekends, where do they live? Where do they spend time? So it's about trying to understand people holistically. And I guess for those young people is to create spaces where they can feel that they are being heard as well. So when we've done the spring breaks in the past, and we've worked with young people, for example, in Kunu or in Alex, we actually... Young people are the same. They've got the same energy, they've got the same drive. And so sometimes when we look at them as, these ones, they might not know how to come up with ideas, is actually a wrong perspective. We just need to create the opportunities. And because young people have energy, they can use that energy for anything, right? So it's about using that energy and creating those spaces and finding a comfortable way to be able to do that, and ask them, guys, what's comfortable, what would you like? And they usually can share some of those experiences.
Okay, we'll take two more questions. I think I've got one over here, there,
yes,
and we'll take one over here.
Nelly, hi.
Hi.
I think the spring age model is an exceptional idea.
Thank
and
you.
I can see how it would actually be ideally, it can work in an organization where there's an open-mindedness and a culture of being saying, let's get this done.
Yeah.
How many public sector clients have you had when it comes to this? Because for me, that's where the bulk of a lot of millennials start. And I don't see how even this could even be considered.
Yeah.
And let alone, even for the older millennials, it becomes a bit tricky to push in. So how many public sector clients have even...
Okay, cool, thank you. One of our first clients was public sector. Partly public sector, I guess, the National Agricultural Marketing Council was one of our first clients that we worked with, and you're right. It's difficult. It's more difficult because it's about exposure, right? It's about what people have been exposed to. It's about what people know, and it does get hard. So I don't know how to get in there a little bit more, but I guess we'll keep trying, right? And finding ways to engage with those organizations.
Okay, and we've got a lady here. It's on already.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I want to know if you've done any research work about culture in the workplace and millennials, because we face very difficult situations. Many a times we end up going to school, you do another master's degree because you want to keep busy, you don't want to annoy people. Or when we go, they accuse us of going. The next interview, they'll be like, but you stayed for a year at Deloitte, why? Yes, so how do we overcome, if you cannot overcome it, because culture can be a monster or a fluffy bear, how do we overcome or maneuver cultures we find embedded in the workplace? Because the people where the bug stops with them, they are the culture. I don't know how it is here because I'm from Botswana. I've seen very embedded strong culture where millennials don't have a voice. They will not get promoted because you are young.
Yeah. It happens, you're right. And I'm sure there's lots of cultural experts in the room, which maybe you can come and help the young lady in terms of culture. But I think for yourself, it's about seeing it not as a fighting thing, because I think young people have this fighting spirit that I have to fight. But when you're coming from a place of fighting, you can't move forward, right? It's hard. And I think, so maybe that's probably the starting point to say, how do I not fight? How do I build? How do I, what other perspective can I have? And of course, you will get to places where they don't want to hear young people. Why would you stay? Why would you stay in a place where you can't be creative, where you can't grow? I know it's hard. It's easier said than done. But I would me personally, I'd encourage people to find an opportunity where they can be themselves, where they can learn, where they can grow, because you can't keep fighting. I mean, some people will say fight, but that's not my perspective. My perspective is find or create something that you can do that will make a difference.
So Neliswa, I think you're being interviewed on main stage around about what time?
I think it's 2:30.
Yeah. So if you want to hear more, she'll be live on stage.
Cool.
But it's brilliant having you.